Okay, well, you've just listened to me talk, and so now's a chance for you to ask questions and to say what you want to say, too. You can make a point. And, but when you do, I want you to tell me your name and also tell me what you're majoring in or what you're interested in. Okay? So you want to start, since you have the microphone?
Yeah, I'll start. My name's John. I'm an electrical engineering major. My question for you is, what pivotal point in your life made you realize that you wanted to do stuff on energy and just this kind of stuff in general?
About the environment?
Yeah, like about the environmental issues that come along with everything.
Well, I've always liked science. When I was 5 years old, I started designing rocket ships that had space for oxygen and food and other stuff. And I mean, that was a long time ago. It may seem ordinary now, but nobody was doing that. And I cut out circles for the sun and all the planets, and I'd make these paper spaceships and fly them around. And then I was always reading science and fascinated by it, and always taking things apart, clocks, and I'd knock on neighbors' doors and ask if they had any old appliances, like radios that weren't working. I'd take them apart, and sometimes I'd fix them. And I read science all through grade school, high school. Got to college, I decided to major in physics because it was interesting and it was hard. It was a big challenge. And I liked physics, but I didn't like being indoors. I hated being in laboratories. I wanted to do science outside. Excuse me. So one day I go to my professor, who's a biologist, and I say, you know, I like science, but I don't want to do it indoors. I want to do science outdoors. He says, there's no more science outside. I mean, which wasn't true, but I was also interested in writing, so I decided I'd do that. I became a science writer. I got a fellowship in science writing. And ever since I was 14, and I know this is my wife says this is very funny. I actually had a life plan when I was 14. My wife said that her only life plan when she was 14 was to make sure she didn't make a fool of herself in school the next day. But I mean, it didn't occur to me this was odd. I had a life plan when I was 14 to become a scientist, do a lot of adventuring, traveling like I did, and write about it. So I became a science writer, but I still liked being in the outdoors. And I did a bunch of things. I was in the Peace Corps. I worked as a science writer. Then I worked up in New Hampshire in the woods as a surveyor's helper. And I really loved being out in the woods. And I kept thinking, there's got to be some science out there like this. And then my sister, who was always sending me good books to read, sent me this little book called Ecology by Eugene Odom. She said, maybe there's a field in this. And see, you wouldn't realize this. This was 1963. Nobody had ever heard of ecology. So I looked into it and I figured, that's what I want to do. That's science outside. And it's great because you can study in the woods. You can walk around in the woods. And I called my friends and said, I'm going into this field. Nobody's ever heard of it. And you'll never hear from me again. That's it, because nobody had ever heard of it. And I went into it because I really liked it. So it was 1963 when I just found that there was a science you could do outside, and I just loved walking around in the woods and studying things. That's when it started.
My name's Justin Martin. I'm an environmental analysis and planning major. This is more of a personal question about your career. You have degrees in ecology, physics, and literature. Done a lot of work in different areas around the country you were speaking about. What was your favorite? How did you get involved in it, and what was the outcome?
My favorite which?
Research project.
My favorite research project? Yeah. Wow, I've had a lot of let me give you the two favorites. My two favorite, okay. The two favorite places was Isle Royale National Park because it's such a wonderful wilderness. And you get out there and there is this sense of when you get it's a wilderness island, you get out there and you're there. And you can get back, but it's not that easy. You get out in the middle of it, and there's moose and wolves, and the weather can get very violent. And you get this sense, it's very much like Thoreau, you get this sense of the wildness. It's kind of a spiritual sense. And I found it hard to leave that. I'd leave that island, and I'd have a kind of withdrawal symptoms. I really liked it. And then the other thing is I studied elephants in Africa, not for an awfully long time, but I love studying elephants. They're my favorite animal. They're so interesting. What's interesting about elephants is that they're undecided. And it turns out that's a sign of intelligence. Now, it's an interesting comment, right? Because like rhinoceroses are stupid. So a rhinoceros gets angry at you and it attacks you, and halfway through it doesn't remember why it's attacking you, but it keeps on going. The elephants, they seem indecisive because when they don't want you around or some other animal around, they go through this very elaborate procedure. They have a warning. They have they have a very simple warning. You're threatening. They walk perpendicular to the distance between you and them, and they wave their trunk up and down. And you're supposed to understand that they say, go away. Because if they come at you that way, you know, they can really hurt you. And so you're supposed to leave, and if you don't leave, they turn around and come and look at you. And they get puzzled. And it's really interesting. It takes like 20 or 30 minutes before they finally say nuts to this, and they bellow, you know, they trumpet, put their ears up, their trunk up, and they charge you. So they don't seem like they really want to hurt you when they're thinking about it. So they were my favorite animals. Now, I'd done a lot of computer work, and another thing I really enjoyed was I worked with people at IBM at the Advanced Research Center, Thomas J. Watson Research Center. We developed the first successful computer model of a multi-species model in ecology. And we did that in 1970, and I really enjoyed that too. We had touchscreen video, which nobody else had. Nobody knew it existed. So we created this model that that grew trees, and if you wanted to cut down a tree, you'd actually touched it. Now sounds like it's an iPad, but nobody had ever heard of that stuff. And that was a lot of fun. And I got involved in and I did a lot of forestry research trying to get out to validate that model, and I've done a lot. So there's a lot of pieces of research I've really enjoyed doing. But you know, if I had to list them, I'd list those three, I guess. But just being able to walk around in the woods and study things was what I was after, and that's what I did.